folks, welcome back to DIY guitar making. Before we get started, let me just say, hey, if you like what I do here and you get a little something out of the lessons that I teach, do me a favor and check out ericschaferguitars.com. There you can find my structured online courses. Also, you can check out the dates for one of my upcoming guitar build workshops. All right, so let's jump right back into guitar number 116, which we last left off. I was explaining and executing a significant part of the Rosette here, but I didn't actually have all of the little, well, I was calling it mother of pearl in the previous episode, but I changed my mind and I switched to abalone. Same thing though, same, process and everything. We're going to do abalone instead of mother of pearl. I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on this because I explained it so well in that previous video, so go check that out. I even explained how to install these, even though I didn't actually do it in that video. I just installed the Teflon strip. But hey, what we're going to do now is remove that Teflon strip, and like I mentioned in that video, it's kind of satisfying pulling this out because it just kind of peels out like a piece of licorice. Look at that. And now we just have these, we're left with these like perfect channels for us to install our individual pieces, which we're going to cut and shape the angles and fit them one by one. Sort of tedious work, but it's pretty enjoyable actually. And again, I'm not going to get deep into the weeds with that here because we got other stuff to do to this guitar, like the bracing pattern. So I really want to get to carving these braces. And so yeah, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. We'll just speed through it and get to the good stuff. All right, so there it is, guys. Let's go ahead and leave this alone and get to work on this now. Okay, guys, so let's get to the fun stuff now. We are going to be carving out the tapers on this top and profiling the braces and basically just making this whole thing look and sound right. So I've got it fastened or fixed right now in my radius dish. And I have this fancy setup here where the radius dish is attached to the shop stand. That just makes the process of carving really enjoyable and comfortable. And so yeah, let's go ahead and stop yammering and just get right to it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use this little depth marker that I have here. This is just a tiny piece of acrylic that I've thickness down to 0.115 inch. That's 115 thousandths of an inch. Nothing magical about that number. That's just something I arrived at over time for the tucked ends of my braces. That is the ends of the braces that will be tucked into the kerfing. So I'll go ahead and use this to mark out my depth on the X-brace arms and on the transverse bar, because those are the only braces that will be tucked into the kerfing. All the other braces, which is really just the 2 finger braces and the 1 tone bar, those are all going to feather down to nothing. Alright, so I like to start with a wide chisel. I have a couple different sizes here. Here's a much more narrow one. This one I like to use more for just final fine tuning work. I always have it sharpened really well too, so it's great for just finessing out the last little bit. We'll put that aside though. We're going to start out with the wide chisel. The wide chisel's nice because I can slide across the width of the chisel and get more of a slicing cut that way. Okay, and I'm about where I want to be. I'm going to go just a little closer to my line. You always want to hold the chisel with 2 hands, and you don't want to dig down too deep with any individual pass. It helps, by the way, you may have noticed this a lot with people using chisels, woodworkers, is that they skew the chisel. This also works with plane blades as well. If you skew the blade, you are effectively changing the effective cutting angle without actually, you know, grinding a new angle into your bevel. So you're creating a more keen edge simply by changing the way you orient that edge towards the surface as you're cutting. Alright, let's hone this a little bit. So I'll get the back of the chisel and then draw it across the leather with the bevel side of the chisel as well. And that just keeps this fresh. It deburrs the edge in a more physical sense. That's what it's actually doing. So as you carve, because that edge is so thin, you're actually fracturing and folding over the edge, so little bits of metal are just clinging to that edge. And every once in a while, if you simply run it across a piece of leather that's charged with a very fine abrasive compound, you will knock those burrs off. And it's good to do that with some regularity, so it's helpful to keep this close by. I can put it right here if I want to. Again, notice that skew. It really makes a big difference, skewing the chisel. As you become flat, so you start out by tapering down, but as you get to the bottom of your scoop, you're running directly with the grain. However, sometimes you'll find that the grain, because you know you're living in an imperfect world, right? We always think in the ideal terms of how the grain should be, but sometimes the grain is actually tipping up just slightly like this or tipping down slightly like this. And if it's down like this, then the tip of your chisel is actually going to be wedging itself into those grain lines and tearing out little chunks. So that's just something to be very mindful of when you get very close to the bottom here. You might just have to slow down and take a couple shallow passes if you notice you have a brace that's misbehaving, like this one is right here. Okay, so that looks good. Let's go ahead and do the transverse bar. Just gonna turn this around so that this clamp is out of the way. Again, just a quick honing to keep this fresh. Man, so much of this kind of work is really just about maintaining sharp tools. So this is called feathering, where I'm just taking this brace end, and here I can even use a less wide chisel. Not to mention this chisel is sharper too. Look at that. The reason I say it's sharper is not because it's more recently sharpened or anything like that, but because this is actually has a more acute angle to the bevel. This is a 20-degree bevel, which does not hold up as well under rough use or constant use. So you end up having to sharpen it more frequently because it'll crumble more easily. But if you don't use it that often, it becomes kind of a specialty chisel that you can get away with having a very acute bevel. Then it doesn't have the downside of constantly having to resharpen it. I do need to constantly hone it though. So here we'll do these little ones with the special chisel. Oop, look at that. I just hit the soundboard. Not a big deal though. And now to profile the braces here, I like to take a little Dazuki saw, like this little Japanese curved edge mini saw here. I really like this, but you could use any small saw. And I'm just making a tiny cut, not at the center of the X, but a little bit out from the center of the X. And that's so that when I then take my chisel, so that I don't just continue to separate between the grain line, that sliver of brace off past that line and out into the center. I want to keep the center flat and squared off so that I can put on the cap, the X brace cap later on, which we'll talk about.
If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.